All right, everyone, we're going to get started. And I know that we will continue to have participants come in from the waiting room, and we welcome them. So my name is Amy Pratt. I work at the Office of Community Education Partnerships at Northwestern University. We're one of the many organizations, like many of you, who are lending some support to the My Shot, My Future initiative, especially to help bring organizations together, practitioners together, around how we're all pivoting from largely in-person, hands-on learning with youth in our city to virtual and remote learning. So we're thrilled today to have a session with Project SYNCERE titled Empowered Virtual Learning, How Project SYNCERE Has Taken Engineering Education Online. We're going to do just some quick introductions and go over the agenda, and then we'll get started. Great. So before we really kick this off, we're asking you to do a couple of things for us. Please update your screen name with your name, your organization, and your pronouns. Please be mindful of your mic. We actually ask that you keep muted until the very end, when we will have some time for Q&A. Please share your video or camera so we can see you, and leverage the chat features. We'll be using that throughout the session. Renee, if you could advance it for me. So the first thing we'd like you all to do is use that chat feature and just say hi to everybody. Tell us who you are, your organization, just to kind of get some activity going in that chat, and so we can welcome and say hi to everyone who's joined today. And I just wanted to remind everyone that this will be recorded, and we will be sharing it via the My Shot, My Future partners page so that people can access it later. Okay, if you would advance for me, Renee. Great. Well, I want to make some introductions this morning, especially for facilitators here. We have Jason, who's the Executive Director and Co-Founder of Project SYNCERE with us today. And we have Emily Constantian, who is the Program Manager and who's been actively involved in their design and summer programming this year. Again, my name is Amy Pratt. I'm with the Office of Community Education Partnerships at Northwestern. My colleague, Renee Neumeier, who works both with us at OSEP as well as at the Evanston Public Library, will also be helping to facilitate. So again, we thank you for being here, and we look forward to this conversation. Next slide. Just a quick agenda for what we're going to cover today. I'll have Jason tell us a little bit about Project SYNCERE, kind of what their mission is and how they've organized their summer programming this year. Then we'll launch into Q&A, which is largely organized around 4 themes. How Project SYNCERE really made that shift from in-person to virtual programming, some of the successes and challenges that they've been facing and dealing with, important share out. They've summarized some five best practices from what they've learned as an organization and working with youth and families in this way this summer. And then a little bit of a discussion around sustaining virtual programming beyond the pandemic. What do you like about it? What is useful in the way that you organize programming? What might you retain? And then what might you want to just kind of move on from after this crisis in our country right now? And then we're going to leave some time at the end for Q&A, about 10 or 15 minutes. We're really asking you to your questions toward the end of the discussion before posting them in the chat, because we don't want to lose anything. So please just kind of hold off on those questions until toward the end of the meeting. Great. If we could go to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Jason. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Amy. And hello to everybody who's on the call today. As she mentioned, my name is Jason Coleman. I'm one of the co-founders, and I serve as Executive Director for Project SYNCERE. Project SYNCERE was started 12 years ago by myself and 2 friends who came from a background of engineering. We really wanted to help young people, one, learn more about engineering, and to really provide them with a pathway to provide them with the skills that they needed to go off to college to hopefully enter a career in the engineering fields. You know, growing up in Chicago, I knew that engineers weren't something prominent that I can see in my community. And so we wanted to ensure that more young people had opportunities to become engaged in engineering, learn about careers in engineering, see people who look like themselves, who are in the engineering field, and really develop a passion to be successful in those areas. And so the last 12 years, we've kind of designed and developed our programs to provide students with year-round opportunities to become engaged in the engineering fields. Over the last 11 years, roughly, we've served over 20,000 students throughout Chicago through a variety of programs. And right now, currently, we offer two major programs: our ENPowered program, which serves as an introduction to engineering for young people in grades 3 through 12 primarily. And then we have our Academy program, which is a year-round engineering academy that prepares young people for careers in engineering in grades 6 through 12. And currently, on an average throughout the year, we serve about 3,500 students through a variety of programs. You can just go to the next page for 1 second. It's just give you guys kind of a landscape of what a typical summer looks like for us. Some of our engagement actually picked up this summer through our virtual program offerings. So here's a list of the different programs that we're currently offering to students throughout Chicago. We have daily middle school camps that run for about 6 weeks, serving about 90 students. We have daily high school camps. There's 3 camps in total. Those also run for 6 weeks, serving about 100 kids. We have daily STEM camps for kids in grades K through 5, which serve about 60 students. And I think those take place over a 6-week period also. And then we have weekly STEM workshops for 400 kids that we host on Fridays to get kids excited about engineering. And through some of these programs are done solely by us, but then we're also working with about 6 different partners to help provide this type of engagement to students throughout Chicago. Do you guys want to go back? Are you going to ask these questions, or do you just want us to talk about these things?
I'm gonna ask the questions.
Okay. I'm probably going to default to Emily because she's our programming expert here, and she can probably give more insight on some of these things than I can.
Great. So the first thing we're gonna kind of talk through, because I think a lot of out-of-school providers have made this shift from in-person to virtual, but we're going to talk about like what does it look like and how did you prepare for it. So can you give us an overview, Emily and Jason, what your virtual programming looks like this summer at Project SYNCERE?
Amy, Emily, can you take a crack at that one?
Yes, so Jason gave the kind of overview of the numbers and the different programs that we have running this summer. So that was kind of an overview of what we're doing each week during the summer. But as we'll talk about later as well, we kind of narrowed down to a certain number of projects that we're doing this summer, and we're offering those with multiple groups of students. So we are using Zoom and Google Hangouts to do our programs. The students will join in and the instructors join in the call, and they'll share screens to present information. Students share screens to show what they're working on, but we are using those platforms. And then we're using a majority of our projects are digital projects, so they are able to complete things on virtual platforms, so using different websites to do programming. We have had a few trials with doing hands-on projects. So for our younger kids, we are doing some actual hands-on projects that they know what the materials are in advance, so they have them prepared, and then they'll kind of do that along with the instructor during the session. So it's kind of a combo.
So how did you kind of prepare to launch everything this summer? How did you prepare as a team, and what were sort of some of the things you thought through to make sure this was a great experience for everyone involved?
So in March, like everyone else, we thought that this would last about 2 to 3 weeks. So actually, I would say a big part of why we were able to transition so well is because Jason and our director of operations made the decision from the beginning of quarantine that we would keep our staff on staff during the shutdown, even though we didn't know what was going to happen. But that meant that we were attempting to engage and train our staff virtually before we even knew we were going to have to work with students virtually. So taking that first couple months where we thought we would still be able to have in-person programs, we were doing trainings online, utilizing Google Classroom, learning Zoom for ourselves to help do those trainings. And I think that really helped us to make the transition to do that with our students a lot easier.
So as you were developing your new approach to engaging with youth, how did you kind of reach out to the families and youth and caring adults that you work with to let them know about that? And then also, how have you built in additional supports so that they can have access to the programming that you're offering?
So with our students and families, we reached out as soon as we had an idea of what the programs would look like. We sent flyers and information out to teachers and families so that we could spread the word. And then in order to engage them, we had meetings, we sent emails, we utilized the same platform, Zoom or Google Hangouts, to have orientations with parents. And actually one of the things that I think is beneficial about having the virtual platform for that sense is that not all of our parents were able to make it at the times that we had orientations, but since we're virtual, we could record the session, which is something we hadn't been able to do in past summers. So all of our parents were able to receive the full orientation by watching the recap. So we contact them that way. And then the students will have access to, we are using Canvas. So the students have access to a Canvas account that then has a lot of information about what's going to take place each day. And that's how we can send out different links and videos to them as well.
Did you encounter any issues with families or youth having access to the devices and things that they needed, or if they were struggling with technology? Did you build any new supports in to support that?
Yeah, you want to go?
I'll take a crack at this one. So, like, as I mentioned previously, we're working with 6 different partners to host a lot of these camps. And so some of our partners like After School Matters or UIC, they actually provided all of their students who didn't have access to computers with a computer or some type of device that would allow them to get online. For students that signed up for some of our middle school camps, it was kind of a requirement for them to have a device. But then CPS is one of our partners also. So I'm thinking that some of those students may have gotten computers through their local schools that signed up students for our programs. And then for our individual programs, like our Academy program, most of those students already have computers, but we also have a bunch of local computers here for students that are already in our programs that we are able to provide to them if necessary. So it wasn't a big issue for us this summer, but I know that having access to devices and internet can be a problem for many of the students here in Chicago.
All right, thank you.
I would say one thing that regarding technology we did need to adjust to was that we had been planning to use Zoom, and we had done a lot of Zoom trainings with our staff, but then as we got on partners who were required to use Google Hangouts like CPS, that was an adjustment that we needed to make in order to fit their needs as well.
Yeah.
All right, so the next part we're going to focus on is kind of the successes you've experienced so far this summer, and also the challenge of virtual programming for you this summer. So do you want to talk about kind of centrally for your staff, what sort of things have gone really well and what sort of things you've kind of needed to revisit or change as you rolled out programming?
Go ahead, Emily.
Okay, sure. So I think there are some things that have been really great due to virtual learning. So I actually have a few pictures on the next screen if you want to see. These are some screenshots from some of our programs that have happened. So one of the things that we've done is we've added a K-5 program, which we normally don't have during the summer, but because we wanted that to be a bit hands-on, a bit more hands-on than our other programs, we have them doing demos. So that top left picture is kind of our staff member doing a demo project with the students, and you can see them looking in at the top, but what you see, what would happen after this is that the students actually have those materials at their house as well. So being able to have the video screen interaction means that as they're watching this demo take place, they can also do the demo at home as well. So that's been beneficial. I have a couple pictures on here of our middle school program. So the top right and the bottom left. So these are two from our middle school camp. This was the same week of camp. The one on the top right is our student actually presenting his screen. So he's sharing with the instructors what he's working on. And so one of the things that I've really enjoyed about having the virtual learning is that our instructors can actually have different students share their screens. So they can kind of check in on what the students are doing. They can talk through any issues that they see as the student is actually working on something. This was CAD, computer-aided design, but it's also working great for the past couple of weeks when we've been doing coding programs so that the instructor can see their code. They can work through any challenges with the student as they're sharing and as they're creating that. Another thing that I think has been really successful is that bottom left picture. We've had the opportunity to bring in a lot of professionals into our Zoom calls because it's just so easy for you to be in your home office and join into our calls. So we're able to bring real engineers, real professionals in to meet with our students. And what this presenter is presenting in that picture is also CAD, but obviously a more advanced version. So I think he's using SolidWorks. But for him to be able to share his screen with the students to show him something he is working on in that moment using the same type of software that the students are learning during that week. And so I think bringing in the professionals, guest speakers, that sort of thing has actually increased this year from previous years because we are virtual. Any other successes? I know Adrienne had some. Trying to think if I.
We're able to engage, I think, a lot more kids this summer, which is really good. And the fact that just the fact that we were able to make that transition pretty seamlessly, I think, was a success for us as well.
And do you think there's any major successes, you've obviously touched on this a bit, or challenges for like engaging with the youth and adults involved, like just switching to the digital format, like how that kind of staff-youth relationship might change or how you've adapted to that?
Yes, it's still definitely a learning process. I did want to include that fourth picture on the screen just to say it's not all butterflies and roses, that having the students like turn on their screens is sometimes a challenge to get them to want to be on video, be verbal in their responses. So that has been a challenge. So we're just trying to, at the beginning of all of our programs, set some class norms to say, we want you to be present. So please have your videos on, turn your mic on when it's time to speak, or if for some reason you can't have your video on, make sure you're responding in the chat. And I would definitely say a lot of our responses to questions or asking of questions, the students are preferring to type in the chat. I think it's the generation, but they're super comfortable with writing their questions in there. But I I don't know generations, but I would love to see all their beautiful faces. That is not what it always looks like on the calls. So making sure our staff are still calling on individual students to engage them, make sure that they're pulled into the lesson, they don't have any questions, is important, even if they can't see them visually and on the screen. Another challenge that we've definitely been experiencing, I think, with everyone is just tech issues and internet coming in and out. So one of our takeaways is co-instruction, but the benefit that we have always done co-instruction, so we'll have 2 instructors in a classroom at a time just to support the learning process. But that's been critical this summer as well, because if one instructor falls off, the other can pick up where they left off. Also, it really helps when one instructor is sharing their screen and can't exactly see the rest of the group, but the other instructor can kind of manage the chat, let the instructor who's presenting know what's going on the back end. So that has definitely helped.
And then one of the last things for this group of questions here is, how are you assessing and documenting the work you've done so far? So have you developed any evaluation tools, or how, because you're working virtually, obviously you've talked a little bit about screen sharing and video, but what other ways are you using to kind of see where youth are at with the process and their end products?
So we have been trying to record at least one of every lesson a day. So some of our lessons, like for the K to 5 program, we'll do the same lesson 3 times a day to reach different students. So we're trying to make sure that we're recording at least one of those a day, so we have that on file if we need to go back and review the video, or say come fall and we need to let other schools or partners know what this really looks like, we can share that with them. Okay, I lost my train of thought. Can you just say the question again?
Yeah, so kind of how are you looking at assessment and documentation of everything?
Sorry, yes. So we have always traditionally done observations and evaluations of our programs throughout. So we haven't changed that process since we've gone virtual. It actually makes it a bit easier. So instead of myself and our other program manager, Ovetta Brown, driving around the city trying to make it to 1,000 sites a day in the summer, we can actually just stay in one place and just hop on to different calls. So we will go on and join our different calls throughout the day, and we have an evaluation rubric that is the same as we have used previously. Some things like efficiency or use of materials or environment might relate more to how they're using Zoom or how they're using the platform. Are they engaging students both on chat and verbally? So some of them we might look at differently than we would in the classroom, but we're still evaluating for the other same pieces. I also would say we're still working on getting our surveying back up to where it has been. So we just started implementing for our younger group a poll using Zoom. So Zoom has the polling feature. And so now at the end of our sessions, we just ask them a quick 2 questions to see kind of how they like the program, if they'll continue or complete their project that they're working on at home, even after the call's over. So I would say we're still kind of getting that back up to where it was when we were in person, but some of the features that we can use on Zoom or other platforms have helped or will help us with that.
Great. So the next piece here, before we have some time for Q&A, is 5 best practices on virtual programming from Project SYNCERE. Do you and Jason want to talk through these?
Sure. We can just flip-flop, Emily. So if you want to take the first one, I'll take the second one, and we can just keep it moving.
Okay. So our first one is quality over quantity. I think as we started transitioning or making the transition, to what our summer would look like, we got excited about the possibility that we could reach any student anywhere in the world. And while that is very exciting, we did want to, at least for our first trial, keep it kind of local, work with partners that we had, so that we could focus on the quality of programming. I mentioned a little bit about the projects that we're using, and that was important to us as well. So we went through projects that we had already used, and we selected projects that would work well for a virtual platform. So instead of doing 10 different projects at 10 different schools, we are doing more like 4 projects across all of our different programs this summer. So keeping that really tight so the staff can become more advanced at the projects that they're doing, I think has helped. I would also say that this one relates to the number of students on the call as well. It can be a bit more challenging with bandwidth and with trying to check in with all the students when you get to a class that's over 20. Our largest class is around 20 students, and I think that that is probably, well, I think we have some high school classes that are around 30 students. So with the co-instruction, that definitely helps out with that. But just making sure that the classes aren't growing to be huge. We had considered doing a webinar style, but it's been really nice to be able to directly engage with students and have them ask questions and have them kind of go along with us in the project.
Yeah. Our next best practice would be flexibility. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of our summer programs are done in partnerships with other agencies, and just really understanding that each of these different agencies are going to kind of have their own philosophy about how they want things done, the number of hours in the day, the particular platform that they want to use. And so we've just kind of been flexible and really just trying to give some of our advice on what we think should work best within that, but knowing that we need to remain flexible to work with all of our partners. And so this summer's actually turned out to be pretty good. We did run into some early hiccups with a few of those, but we've been able to work with the partners to kind of get over all of the early hurdles and continue to put on an excellent program for the students this summer.
So for co-instruction, I mentioned a couple times already, but it has been critical for us to have the 2 staff on the call, or it's just been super helpful to have the ability to have one person leading instruction while the other is managing the tech in the background, and then trading off. It just makes it a lot more smooth for the users.
Yeah, and then the next one is keep it simple. And this is kind of similar to what Emily's talked about earlier, but you know, we went through and really chose projects for the summer that we thought would be most ideal for our virtual platforms. And so we didn't want to kind of overwhelm ourselves with really intricate projects, given the short amount of time that we had to kind of figure things out and put things together for the summer. So we try to keep it simple, you know, don't overcomplicate things, but choose projects that are, you know, engaging, exciting for young people. And that's what we chose to do this summer.
And then the last one is to choose the platform that best meets your needs. So there are so many options for what you can choose in terms of student management and also the actual meeting platform. And our director of program wrote a note here saying, choose the one that meets your needs and not the one that has all the bells and whistles. So you have to think about what our features are you going to actually use and what will be most helpful for the project that you're teaching. We really like Zoom because of the breakout room features and the abilities that hosts and co-hosts can do in terms of naming students. I think that helps a lot. But some of our partners need to use Google Meet, and so we do that and we make it work. So kind of just whichever one best meets your needs, to just play around with how you can adjust it to work with what you need to do.
All right, awesome. Thank you. This whole discussion is really helpful. So the last little piece here is sustaining virtual programming at Project SYNCERE. So if you just want to kind of talk through kind of like long-term, are you going to keep certain aspects of programming, even if we're able to at some point do more in-person programming, and kind of like why not?
I'll kind of touch on this. So yes, we're definitely going to keep some aspects of the virtual programming, especially for the fall. I don't think we're going to be going back to school in the fall. So we'll definitely be looking to work more closely with a lot of our school partners in the fall. I also think for some of our out of school time programs like our academy, allowing guests to maybe present some of their work or kind of take some of our students to a virtual tour of their facilities like field trips, I think is a great opportunity for our kids. But then also the ability to offer workshops online virtually to students anywhere in the world, I think is a pretty cool idea. And so we're going to look more into developing some of those options as a potential future model for Project SYNCERE as well. Did I miss anything, Emily?
No, I follow you. But the only things that I would say that I would continue as a program manager for our programs virtually is I have really loved the ability to record a meeting, especially for parents, and be able to share that out with them. I think it's helpful because it's very hard to get all the parents in the room at one time. So that feature has been super helpful. And then in terms of with our staff, how we train our staff, like I said before, early on in quarantine, we figured out how to utilize Google Classroom and use that for staff training. And I think that was a revelation for us because as we have new staff coming on so regularly, we were doing the same trainings over and over. And before COVID, BC, we hadn't considered making it virtual so that it exists online all the time, and anyone that comes in can go into the platform and take the training on their own. And I think that will really help us in the future as well.
All right, thank you both Jason and Emily through talking through all the different aspects of your program and sharing like what went well and what didn't go well. This next part, we're gonna open up to questions from attendees. So if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself or you can type them in the chat.
Yes, I'm Kenneth Hill, and I want to congratulate Jason and his team. I think they're doing an outstanding job. The needs are huge across America, and programming like this is critical to save some of our students who we know some will be left behind, but at least they're moving forward to save some. I do have a question that ties to this, and I wanted to ask Jason if he's familiar with Black Tech Media, and they did a smart Black Tech ecosystem in-depth analysis of the racial equity in Chicago Tech. And the reason why I'm asking is if he's familiar with that, maybe it's a way we can get my child, my future to present like this excellent presentation to the Chicago community.
So I am familiar with, I believe it's Black Tech Mecca.
Yeah.
And I am quite familiar with them, but I think the ED or the leader over there left Chicago, so I'm not sure who's heading it up right now and who's doing anything with it, but I think it's definitely worth the conversation or a look deeper into it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I believe Katie from the Shed had a question. Katie, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was just curious. I know you guys said that the students had the opportunity to do a lot of your demos on their own as well. Were you guys strategic in the materials and making sure it was items that would be easy for them to acquire or would have in their home? Or were you guys shipping kind of what materials they would require to be able to do those demos?
Yeah, so that depended on the age group of our students. So for our K-5 students, we did demo projects that were super basic materials you could get at the grocery store, Dollar Tree, things like that. So we were hoping they were things that they could just find around the house, or they could choose different items to work for the same purpose in order to be able to complete the demo. A couple of the CPS partners that we worked with did take that material list and then prepare bags of materials for their students that their students then came and picked up at their school, so that then when they were on the virtual call, they already had the bag of materials with them. For our older students, our middle school and high school programs, the ones that we were doing some projects that required a hands-on build, we did prepare those materials in advance for them and created bags and kits for them that then they came and picked up at our office, or if they weren't able to, some of our staff delivered a few of them as well.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Emily. I believe Daniel has a couple of questions next.
Yes. Hi, Jason. I remember talking to you about 10 years ago when you were getting started. So it's really good to see how your program has grown. One of the questions that I asked earlier was answered about the co-instruction, but how many of the students who participate in your program 1 year continue into the next year or in multiple years? Do you keep a record of that, or do you have that information?
It really depends on the program. We do track all of our students. So we have a Salesforce platform that's built out to track all of our kids. I would say for our Academy program, which is our more robust program, we have about an 80% retention year to year for those kids, but it's also a pathway program that's built out to keep those kids engaged over the years. For our ENPowered program, if we're doing some, let's say we're talking about summer for our ENPowered program, those middle school students typically do come back year to year. I don't have the exact number to give you right now, what percentage that is. And then sometimes those middle school kids will matriculate to the high school program as well. But for most of our school-based programs, it really depends on the school. You know, we may be in a school and we only serve 7th grade students in that school, so we wouldn't see those kids again. But then some schools may want us to serve a mixture of middle school students. And so if a student participated at that program in 6th grade and we were back the next year, then they do have the opportunity to participate. So we do have those numbers in our system, but I just haven't run a report to see what percentage that is.
It would be good to try to aggregate that information and share it on your website. Obviously, the longer the kids participate in STEM learning, the more they're going to benefit from it over the long term.
Agreed, yeah.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Eric from near West Side. I have a question for you guys. I think I heard you mention the term Canvas, like you use a platform called Canvas. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Canvas is a student management platform. So if you've heard of like Moodle or Blackboard, it's similar to that, very similar to Google Classroom, but it's a place to kind of store all of your different modules that the students will go through. You can upload videos or program information that the students will then have access to. So we add the students in as users, and then they're assigned to a certain class in Canvas so they can see all their class materials.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that information.
Mm-hmm.
Hi there, this is Susan. I just, hi. I first of all, I wanted to say I really enjoyed this, this information, and I really appreciate the co-instructor idea because, you know, you get everything lined up beautifully and then suddenly your internet goes out, right? So that was a really great takeaway for me, and having somebody also share their screen so you're not trying to do 6 things at once. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that an organization, I apologize, I can't remember the name of the organization at the moment, but they work with incarcerated youth and youth who are at risk who may or may not want to share like the background, right? So where they are. So they spend a little bit of time initially asking people to kind of figure out how can they create like a persona. I noticed that some people here have some great backgrounds. I'm not so adept at that. I just sort of do what's going on, but I think that's a really great way to maybe incorporate that as an activity. Say, you know, mess around with your background in some way so that people kind of take ownership of what they're protecting, you know, and you also could maybe do filters or some other kind of thing that they might be familiar with. And I think that puts young people in the position of putting their best face forward, if you will, because it's such a, you know, a time when, you know, you're on the screen and there's a big focus, not as if you were in a classroom, you could sort of hide behind somebody or kind of sit tight. But I think that's something to try. I want to pass that on. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen.
Other questions from the group? Please chime in.
I'd like to follow up with the comment the lady made about the youth. I don't know if this is something that Jason would be interested in, but there is a youth at a youth center that Representative Danny Davis, and we did go over to about 35 youth now. It used to be 150, and they're very focused. And some of those, I could tell that some of those young African-American men and Latino men are very sharp. I don't know if that's something that you might want to consider venturing into, but if it is, I know Representative Danny Davis could make that connection. I just wanted to say that some of those young people in that room that I saw are extremely sharp. I don't know how they got into that facility, what happened. That's just something I threw out for maybe a future time.
Okay. They're at the juvenile detention center?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk more about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken.
This is Dan Bassel again. Jason, did you have to increase staff numbers to accommodate the online learning? That's half my question. The second half would be to the my future leaders. If co-instruction is the way to go, how many of the youth organizations around the city have the staff capacity to do co-instruction? And is the city doing anything to try to provide resources to help build that capacity?
So for us, we picked up a few people before the summer started, but you know, luckily we were also able to hold on to all of our staff through the pandemic, and we didn't have to let anybody go. So we were ramped up in the spring semester anyway because we were preparing for our big engineering competition that we host. So we had a large amount of staff anyway, but we did pick up a few additional people before the summer started. But co-instruction has always been our motto also, Dan.
And I would say what helped too as well is that normally we would have, for example, our middle school program would be a full day program. So from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. This summer, with it being virtual, we know we're not going to have students sit in front of their computer for a full day. So because our program is now 2 hours with the instructor and then 1 hour on your own at home, that means that our instructors could do multiple sessions a day. So they could be teaching a morning and an afternoon class, which allowed us to reach more students with the same number of staff.
Good point.
A follow-up, do you have volunteers acting as instructors?
No, we use volunteers to come in and talk to students about careers and things like that, or to host some type of PD session for our kids. But all of our classes are taught by our paid instructors.
Any more questions?
Have a little bit more time.
Let me just make one more pitch. Since this will be recorded and it'll be shared out through email and probably on social media, I really encourage everyone to make an effort through their own social media to share this because the recording is a good lesson example that a lot of people could learn from if they know it's available. If you share and you use the my shine, my future hashtag, then you're connecting with more of the different people in this community.
Great.
All right, so everybody's contact information is on here. If you come up with questions, feel free to reach out to Jason or Emily or to OSEP staff. You can also visit the My Child, My Future Partners page. That's where this will be posted after this. And you can also see other archive webinars that we've done this summer as well, featuring other community partners too.
Thank you, Amy, and the rest of the Northwestern team. This has been fun.
Thank you. This is great.
Great.
And look for more opportunities coming. We're going to be sharing information on another webinar that's coming up. Yeah, maybe you could post in the chat. I think it's toward the end of July, right?
Yes, so we're going to
put out more information on that.
July 31st. Thanks, Amy.
Great, July 31st. So look for info on that, and please feel free to share through your networks too.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Emily. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I got a lot of good information from this call.
I thought it was great.
Thank you all so much for joining. We really appreciate it. Is it just us left?
I think so.
Yep.
That was efficient. Usually we have